What you're seeing right now are highly educated people. They were once on the winning path of life, making 6-digit salaries. They work for the biggest companies out there and now they have to live out of trailers to survive. This guy told in a BBC interview that he had to apply for over 2,000 jobs and is still on the hunt. He also said that he wasn't prepared for more than 6 months of unemployment. And in order to make a living, he had to pick up jobs in delivery and landscaping. Unfortunately, there are many people like him. And this is not only a struggle for the United States of America, this is happening all over the world. But what is happening to our global job market and what does it mean for you? Let's start looking at some facts regarding the US unemployment rates. If we take a look at the last 3 years, we see a constant slow incline in unemployment. As of 2026 in the United States, we are facing 7.36 million people without having a job. And what is far more concerning, in the European Union, 25% of people who are working in their jobs are actually overqualified because they hold a bachelor's degree. This rate is even higher for non-EU citizens who live in the European Union. It's around 40%. And this means almost every second person who lives in the European Union and is a non-European Union citizen is working a job below their standards. So the real question becomes, does it really make sense to get a degree and waste probably the best times of your life just to work for a job below your standards? Let's now look at some stats for that. Well, according to Statista, the number of bachelor degree recipients is yearly around 2 million. And by the end of 2032, it's expected to grow to 2.5 million. Plus around 1 million people are expected to get a master's degree annually. That sounds quite a lot, but if you look at some different forecasts, you can see that they foresee that in the future of the job market, almost 71% of global job offerings would require at least higher education. As you can see in this graphic over here, we are undergoing a massive shift in the job market. It's expected that there will be probably a lot more jobs, but they will require higher education. To be precise, in 2031, at least 42% of job offerings will require at least a bachelor's degree. So against common belief that getting a degree is nonsense in today's economy, these forecasts show the relevance in future's job market. But if this is all true, right, why is that BBC guy who gave an interview still looking for a job? One big reason is that interest rates and venture capital is drying up since 2023. In that year, interest rates were on a 20-year high. So cheap money was basically gone, and that led to a shift in the mindset of venture capitalists. So instead of investing much more into growth in tech, which tech was used to have all over the last 20 years probably, they shifted their mindset into profitability. Remember, in 2023 alone, 100,000 jobs were cut. And the current situation is not quite different from 2 years back, although the Fed is cutting interest rates, but they are nowhere near the level between 2008 and 2015. Because as I said, in that time, this was literally cheap money. To understand why these interest rates were so low back in the day, you have to look at the economic crisis in 2008, the housing crisis, and the COVID pandemic crisis. If you watch that graphic closely, you can see after every crisis, the interest rates went almost to zero. This was an extreme measure by central banks like the Federal Reserve to stabilize the economy. So for you to understand this even deeper, we would need another video for that. But in the video right now, I want to cover the surface so you can understand the basic concepts. If you're interested in that deep dive video, write down monetary politics and I'll make sure to cover it in one of my upcoming videos. So let us zoom out for a second to understand the basic concepts right here. A very high level key takeaway is, if inflation rises, usually interest rates will follow. Through this measure, central banks hope to stabilize price growth. But there was a country in 2021 which challenged the common economics belief. Between the midst of 2021 and 2023, Türkiye followed a different strategy. They did exactly the opposite. They cut interest rates while the inflation was rising and rising. By common understanding of monetary politics, this would even further weaken the national currency, especially if an economy is reliant on foreign business. But President Erdogan of Türkiye called this a strategy. He said that this will lead to price drops in business and that the economy of Turkey is so strong that it will outgrow the market. He supposed that low interest rates would drive down the Turkish currency, and in consequence this would make Turkish products much more attractive in the market. Unfortunately for Turkey, this approach couldn't be tested long term, as the economy was literally on the edge of collapsing. That's why after the elections in 2023, they changed their strategy. So they followed again the classic common belief of economics with interest rates up to 50%. These interest rates were even higher than the inflation. So you have to think like this. They tested from the one end to, whilst inflation was high, with low interest rates. They saw this test didn't work, so now we have to tackle this challenge from the other side. Whilst inflation is high, let's say at 30%, we will higher our interest rates to 50%. So they are now pushing from the other extreme. This uncertainty has of course a big impact on prices, job market and global business, and at least on financial stability of a country. And what I explained here over Turkey is just an example what our global job market is facing on a much lower scale, we can say. This lower scale opens up the possibility to recover faster. As I said, we can see that the Fed rates are going down again, which is good for venture capitalists because they would be then more open to invest in growth opportunities, right? Now the real question becomes, can we be really sure to have a job market again where I work for one employer for 30 to 40 years and retire probably happy then? Well, and to be quite honest with you here, job markets are like living organisms. They're in constant motion. When you think neutral about it, Amazon was founded in 1995, Meta in 2004, Tesla in 2003, and Google in 1998. These were literally startups back then with a handful of people, and maybe just after 10 years they started to build up a solid amount of workforce. For example, at Alphabet, let's look at 2013. They had an employee count of 50,000 people. And in 2025, they had an employee count of 190,000. And that's something you can see all across tech. Companies are scaling up because money is cheap from investors. They are scaling into different businesses, just trying to find their position in the market or creating new markets even. During that time, a lot of money is needed and flowing from the investors because money is cheap, or better said, was cheap. And growth companies are not usually the ones making the highest profits. And even if they do make profits, they invest it again in their business to grow even more. In classical investing, you call them growth companies. By the way, if you want to really understand the difference between growth investing and value investing, watch this video over here I recently shot. However, there will become a time where the focus of these companies shift. A perfect example for that is just what happened with AI. Between 2020 and 2022, companies like Amazon, Meta, Google were pushing on the digital world economy. They hired thousands of people expecting permanent digital growth. You will remember probably all these aspirations over the metaverse, virtual reality and so on. Then AI arrived and suddenly the biggest tech companies were laying off thousands of people. Zuckerberg called this years of efficiency at Meta. But at the same time, whilst they were laying off thousands of people, they were hiring again thousands of people in a new field. They were now hiring AI engineers. So it wasn't that jobs were just disappearing, it was just because jobs market had shifted their focus. In order for you not to panic, I want you to take a look at the three economic sectors. So for those who don't know, the primary sector is agriculture, the secondary sector is industrial, and the tertiary sector is services. In this graphic over here, you can see that most people in the 1900s were working in agriculture. But through advancements in the industry like heavy machinery, then the jobs got reduced in agriculture. Because I think it's a no-brainer to see that heavy machinery is much better to work on land as human workforce, right? At around the 1940s, people working in industrial and in the service sector had heavily outperformed the numbers in people who are working in agriculture. And nearly 100 years later, we are seeing AI challenging our current norm. But as this graphic also shows, and this is what I want to tell you, these jobs just don't disappear, it gets transformed into new sectors. So in order to avoid skill mismatch, you have to stay up to date. Think of it like this: you're a child and dream to become the next baseball star, let's say, to make a lot of money when you turn pro. You work literally years of your life towards that goal, right? You're investing heavily in that. But the day you turn pro, you realize that the pro players don't get as much compensated as they were in the past. Big reason for that is that baseball as a sport, let's say for example, don't get me wrong here, I have nothing against baseball players, but let's say that the sport was unable to attract investors, advertisements and so on. And suddenly then you realize, just when you turn pro, that you can't make a living with that skill you built up over the years. And if you just missed that, to build also another skill up, to maybe switch then into another sport, to turn pro in that, maybe to secure your living, then you will find yourself in a very bad situation. That's something of course you should definitely avoid, so keep an eye always on the job market. Let's come to AI with that. It may sound ironic to some of you guys, but companies are hiring massively in AI, because common belief is that AI will make jobs obsolete. The World Economic Forum estimates that there will be a job cut of 92 million jobs by 2032, but at the same time AI is expected to generate 170 million new jobs. If you now take a look at the largest growing job sectors by 2030, you'll realize the following. You'll see that on the growth side, you have jobs that can connect to AI to optimize their output. And whilst on the other side, you have jobs which AI is just doing better. It's the same concept that happened to agriculture 100 years back. The machinery was just better and cheaper, so the agriculture business just switched onto machinery. That's quite normal, that's business, that's economy. And we have to accept that machines and computers and artificial intelligence can do jobs better than us. At least some of these jobs, right? And there is another threat that we as people living in industrial countries need to realize. If AI probably is not doing the job quite well, then this doesn't mean or is a guarantee for you that you will be able to perform the job. No, there is a workforce from low-cost countries who can probably do the same job and the same quality as you and me. A good example for that are IT service departments of companies in Europe. They are switching from Central Europe to Eastern Europe because the wage there is much less. Or probably you also know that many fashion brands just produce in China or Bangladesh. That's why movements like America First focus on bringing back national manufacturing or national value-adding services and value-adding activities back to their home country, because they want to keep the money inside their country. But in consequence, this would mean much higher prices for the end consumer. And who is the end consumer? Again, you and me, who have to pay for the product a much higher price. If we now switch on the bird's eye perspective and look at what happens when interest rates are high, and manufacturing lines are coming back and we have to focus on national products first, this could mean that prices will go even higher. Or maybe, and this is just a maybe, it could force the sellers, because the consumers like you and me are not ready to pay for a product $5, which today only costs 50 cents, let's say. And if the sellers come down with the price, this is then the price decreasement we talked about. This could stabilize the inflation. So at the end of the day, amidst of all this dust, you have to draw your own path to success. Sometimes we just forget that there will be no one saving our financial life. Besides ourselves, we literally have no one else to trust. No politics, no governments, no companies. That's why for many years on this channel I talk about starting a business, becoming financially free while still working in a 9-to-5, so getting all the advantages you can have at the moment. And just quietly, slowly building up different income streams that secure your financial life. If you switch your mindset to this, then you don't look at other people in the market. You don't look at politics that much. You don't look at governments that much, where you hope that they got you covered. You then look on what you can do. So you don't let others design the market, and with that your future, your financial future, you start designing and creating your own financial future. That's what helped me a lot, and I hope that this will help you too down the line. If you like this video, like and subscribe and comment what you liked most about it. So see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.